Hey, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to the Endless TBR. My name is Christian, and this is my YouTube channel where I love to talk about books. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to click on this video where I'm going to be talking about all 12 of my nostalgia picks that I've read within the last 12 months and rank them in order from least favorite to favorite. Now, if you're wondering what a nostalgia pick is, it's basically a book that I've chosen from my bookshelf to reread. It's a book that I read when I was a little kid sometime during grade school that I really have fond memories of reading, and I decided to reread them as an adult to kind of get that hit of nostalgia, but then also view the story through an adult lens. I was a big reader when I was a little kid, all throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. I read a ton. Then, once I hit my late teens and early 20s, I pretty much stopped reading entirely. It wasn't until 2024, I was 28 years old, I got exposed to the Dune franchise, and that kind of reinvigorated my love for reading. And I kept a lot of those books from when I was a little kid. I have my shelves all around me, from everything from the Gregor the Overlander series to the Hunger Games series. I have the Twilight books. I have a section with Captain Underpants books. I have behind me my Harry Potter and Inheritance Cycle books. So these are all books that I've kept since I was from as early as elementary school. A lot of them are from my high school years. And I thought it would be a good idea just to go through and get a little more mileage out of the books, reread some of them, and get that hit of nostalgia that we all love so much when we experience something that we loved from earlier in our lives. So in April of 2025, a month before I started making videos on this channel, I decided that every month I was going to have a nostalgia pick. I was going to pick either a book or sometimes it was an entire series that I was going to read for that month, and it's one that I was revisiting from my childhood. So now it is March of 2026. So that means I have read 12 of these in a row. It's been an entire year since I've started on this nostalgia journey. And so I thought it would be fun to make this video to do like a year in review where I go through all the books and just kind of rank them in order from my least favorite to my favorite. So that's what this video is going to be. Before I rank them, though, I figured I'd go through the months and just show you what I read in those months so you have an idea of the books that we're working with for this video. So starting in April of 2025, we had Deception Point by Dan Brown. This was the book that kind of started the journey. I loved Dan Brown a lot as a kid in high school, especially. And so I saw this one on the shelf, and this was the one that kind of gave me the idea to start this nostalgia pick journey. So Dan Brown Deception Point was my April 2025 read. In May of 2025, I read Del Toro Quest 1 by Emily Rada, by far one of my favorite children's fantasy stories of all time. And then in June, I read the City of Ember series. So, four books. We have The City of Ember, we have The People of Sparks, we have The Diamond of Darkhold, and The Prophet of Yonwood right there. So, that was my June nostalgia pick. In July, I read Holes by Lewis Schaefer. In August, I read The Chronicles of Narnia. This one I cheated a little bit on. I read 5 of the 7 Narnia books in August. 2 of them I read in July, but I figured since I read the majority of them in August, I could just count this as my nostalgia pick for August. And then in September, I read Del Toro Quest 2 by Emily Rada. In October, I did like a blind pick of 3 different Goosebumps books. I own dozens and dozens of these, and I kind of just grabbed 3 that stuck out to me on the shelf. So yeah, those are Stay Out of the Basement, The Night in Terror Tower, and Why I'm Afraid of Bees. So that was October. In November, I read Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. And in December, I read Ink Spell by Cornelia Funke. In January, it was Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. In February of 2026, it was The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. A lot of Dan Brown. Like I said, I loved him a lot in high school. And then the book that I actually just finished this morning before making this video was my March read, and that is Midnight for Charlie Bone by Jenny Nemo. So those were the last 12 months of nostalgia picks for me. Now I figured I'd go through and just very quickly and briefly talk about each of them and rank them in order from my least favorite read to my favorite. So let's get into it. So coming in at number 12, and I should preface this by saying all of the books in this list I gave what I considered to be a positive review For me, if it is a 3 out of 5 or higher, I consider that to be a positive. So just know that off the bat that I didn't think any of these books were bad. But coming in at number 12 is definitely the book that I enjoyed the least. And at least it proves to me that I don't have recency bias. And that is Midnight for Charlie Bone, the book that I finished just this morning. Of all the books on this list, this one just hit me the least. I felt the most underwhelmed by the nostalgia of this story. I thought this was overall an interesting story, but there was so much going on in such a short amount of time. I feel like Nemo focused in a lot of aspects of the story that could have been cut out and didn't focus enough on more of the interesting stuff like Charlie Bone himself, his powers, the university that he's going to filled with all these other kids that have superpowers. That was the stuff that I really wanted to be invested in, but I felt like the story just had so many characters in such a short amount of time, and it focused on this plot about a missing girl that I felt like it was just so rushed through. And so that's why this one is coming in at number 12. So coming in at number 11, and I feel really, really bad for putting these low because R.L. Stein has had a huge influence on my life. He is a big reason, I think, why I love horror. But the three Goosebumps books that I read are coming in at number 11. And again, I don't think these are bad books by any mean. I would give all of these what I consider to be favorable reviews, but rereading Goosebumps books as an adult just hasn't hit me in the same way that it did when I was a kid. I read Night of the Living Dummy, which is a book that I remember loving when I was a little kid. I read it like a year and a half ago, and it did not hit me the same way. I think it's just, these books are definitely written for a very young audience, and I think rereading them as an adult, it's difficult to get into them. I can appreciate what they are and I appreciate what they do for kids and loving scary stories. Um, but they just were not my favorite reads out of this list by any means. I will say my favorite of these three was Stay Out of the Basement. There were some genuinely spooky moments in this one. Night in Terror Tower was solid too, but Stein did this thing where he basically spells out what the ending is going to be at the very beginning of the book, and I was like, come on, man, kids aren't stupid. Like you can lead them on a little bit before you spell it out for them. And then Why I'm Afraid of Bees was just okay. I thought this was definitely the weakest of the three. But that is my three Goosebumps picks coming in at number 11. So coming in at number 10 is the City of Ember series by Gene DeProw. I had such mixed feelings about this series. So the first two books, The City of Ember and The People of Sparks, I thought were really, really solid stories. The City of Ember deals with mature themes like questioning your leadership and corrupt leadership and when it's time to do things in the best interest of the people. And then The People of Sparks deals with themes like anti-war and learning to get along with people that are different from you. So very mature themes, I thought, within these children's stories, and overall really entertaining stories. If you're not familiar, the City of Ember follows this group of people who live in an underground city called Ember, and that city is dying. The generator is dying, and it's leading to power blackouts throughout the city. So the people are trying to escape. And so I thought these were really, really great. But then there's these two books. You have The Diamond of Darkhold, which is the book three in the trilogy, and it's not a bad book. I just thought it was very underwhelming and didn't have those mature themes like the first two books did. And then there's The Prophet of Yonwood, which was by far my least favorite read of 2025. I hated this book. I thought the story was nonsensical. I thought the characters were terrible, and I thought it overall detracted from the series. So you have two books that I really enjoyed, and then you have one book that I thought was meh, and then one book that I just absolutely did not like. And so I think if I was just ranking the first two books, this would be much higher up on the list. But when you include all four, which technically the whole series was my nostalgia pick for the month, it's got to end up lower on the list. So that is the City of Ember series. I would recommend if you're going to read this series, just do these two. Maybe the Diamond of Darkhold, but the first two books are really quite good. But the other two, nah. Coming in at number 8 is Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. Now, I will admit, this is a book that I remember loving as a kid, and then rereading it as an adult, I certainly liked it a lot, but I did not have that same love for it that I did as the second and third book in the series. I thought this one was definitely the weakest of the three. If you're not familiar with the basic story, You have a father and daughter named Mo and Maggie. They have the ability to read a story, read a book, and when they do, fictional characters from the book come into the real world with the caveat that things from the real world get read into the book. And Mo basically accidentally reads his wife, Maggie's mother, into this book called Inkheart and brings some of the fictional characters into the real world. And the story revolves around Mo and Maggie and some of their acquaintances battling against some of these more evil forces that have been read into the real world. And the reason why I didn't like this book as much, I will say, is a slight spoiler for the story. So if you don't want to hear that, skip ahead like 30 seconds in the video. But basically, this entire book takes place in the real world, and you hear so much about the different fantastical elements of the Inkheart book, like the fairies and the magical forests and all that stuff, and you just never really get to experience those things. The book just gets a little bit repetitive, and I would just found myself longing for some more of those fantastical elements. There is a really good finale and a really good showdown at the end with the villain that I think is quite strong in Capricorn. But overall, I did think this was the weakest of the three books, and it didn't have that same nostalgic hit that I remember when I read it as a kid. But nonetheless, it's still a really solid story. So coming in at number 7 is The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This is one of those ones, it's kind of like the City of Ember series where I have mixed feelings about it. Although I will say none of the books in this series I think are nearly as bad as the Prophet of Yonwood book from the City of Ember. But this is a 7-book series. You got The Magician's Nephew, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and The Silver Chair, and The Last Battle. And basically, the books in this series that I think are really, really good, for instance, The Magician's Nephew and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, are some of my favorite children's fantasy novels of all time. Some of the other books that I think are weaker, like The Silver Chair and The Last Battle, kind of bring the series down a little bit for me. Specifically, The Last Battle, I really, really didn't care for that book. And then some of the other books are in the middle there. But overall, I have a lot of nostalgia for the Chronicles of Narnia series. Like I said, I think the highs outweigh the lows. Like I would say, besides the Magician's Nephew and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I thought The Horse and His Boy was really, really good. I also enjoyed The Voyage of the Dawn Treader a lot. Prince Caspian for me is kind of in the middle. It was a little boring in my opinion, but the highs definitely outweigh the lows, and I think most people are familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia stories, so I don't really have to go into them too much. But a really solid time, and I enjoyed rereading through it again as an adult. All right, coming in at number 6 is Deception Point by Dan Brown. This is a thriller that deals with this government agency, NASA. I don't know why I should just said NASA. NASA discovers aliens basically inside of this meteorite, and a bunch of people get roped into it. And it turns out there's this giant government conspiracy and people trying to cover the government conspiracy up. And what I'll say about this story is that I will admit it is not it's not the best writing in the world. There is some dialogue and some moments at the story that I hate to use the word cringe, but honestly, they are a little cringeworthy, and I could see why someone would read those aspects and think that they are, very immature. But the thriller aspect of the story, trying to get to the bottom of exactly what is going on, are these actual aliens, or is this a giant government conspiracy? Try to convince the world that there's aliens. There's a lot of great questions in here, and I had a lot of fun reading through this story. I've always been a big fan of Dan Brown. I feel like he's kind of, you love him or you hate him, but especially in high school, I read all of Dan Brown's stuff that was available, and Deception Point was one of those books that I had a great time reading back in high school, and I had a great time reading as an adult as well. Solid 4 out of 5 for me. Coming in at numbers 4 and 5, we have the other two Dan Brown books, Angels and Demons and The Da Vinci Code. The reason why I'm doing these two together is depending on the day that you ask me, I might say that I like Angels and Demons better, and then the next day I might say I like The Da Vinci Code better. In my opinion, these two books are so close in quality and entertainment value that I had a really hard time deciding which one I like better. So I just said that these are number 4 and 5. I read both of these books in high school. I enjoyed them so, so much. I've said recently on some of my videos, because I just read this one in February, and I read Angels and Demons in January. I am not a history buff. I do not know the intricacies of anything to do with art, and religion and stuff like that. And so I think a lot of the criticism about these books is that the historical aspects are just so outlandishly ridiculous that they are completely beyond believability. I kind of put that off to the side. I just enjoy these books for what they are, and that is just crazy, over the top thrillers that follow Robert Langdon, this symbologist who knows a lot about religion and symbols and all that stuff. And in Angels and Demons, he has to save the Vatican from a Illuminati threat that has surfaced. And in the Da Vinci Code, he is trying to locate the legendary Holy Grail, after being involved in this bizarre murder scandal in which he got dragged into. And so I enjoyed both of these books a lot. These are also solid 4 out of 5 reads for me. I thought they were very entertaining, very easy, popcorny reads that I just kind of dived into and was able to knock out within a couple days. And I'm really excited to get into the other Robert Langdon books because I have not read them. These are the only two that I've read, and so I'm excited to see where the other ones go with this character. Coming in at number 3, we have Inkspell by Cornelia Funke. I thought this book was an improvement over the original in almost every way. The main criticism that I said of Inkheart, which was a mild spoiler, which I will not repeat, is solved in this book because of the location that this book takes place in. Fully satisfied the fantasy elements that I was really, really longing for in that first book. I think a lot of the characters in this story, especially Dustfinger in this one, get a lot of level ups. That's the I don't know what I'm trying to say. They get better. The characters get better. They have a lot of great moments throughout the story. Like I said, especially Dustfinger. This is really his book, and I thought he was excellent. The ending of this book I thought was tragic and just made me immediately want to jump into Ink Death. The only aspect of the story that I said I liked less than the first one was the villain. I thought Capricorn from Inkheart was a really solid villain. In this book, the main villain is this character called the Adderhead, and I thought overall he was just a pretty weak force for our main characters to be fighting up against. But villain aside, when it comes to the setting and the plot and everything else that revolves around the story, I thought this was a nice plus one, and it led into Ink Death, which I thought was by far the strongest of the series and built off of a lot of what happened in this story. So that is my number 3. And then coming in at number 2 is what I consider to be an all-time children's classic. I love this story so much, and that is Holes by Lewis Schaefer. Um, Holes the movie is one of my all-time favorite movies ever. I think it is one of the most quotable movies. Basically, anything that Mr. Sir says is comedy gold. And I was so excited to get back into this book. I remember reading it as a kid, and going back and rereading this book was just such a delightful time. I enjoyed all of it. I will say, though, I do think I enjoy the movie better. And I'm not sure if that's just because I've watched this movie so much. Holes is that movie that my fiance and I, if we don't know what to watch, we just throw Holes on. So I, I think I just the movie is so ingrained into my DNA that I don't think it's possible for me to like the book better. But it was amazing seeing where all of that source material came from. You have such an enjoyable and delightful story here with incredible characters. Zero and Stanley Yelnats and all the D10 boys are so awesome. And I just love this book so much. It's just, this was exactly what I was looking for when it came to these nostalgia hits. While reading this book, there were a couple moments where I just got tears in my eyes because I was revisiting my childhood through this story. And in my opinion, this is an absolute classic when it comes to kids' literature. If you have not read the whole story, what are you doing? Go out and read it because it's amazing. And coming in first place, if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you've probably already predicted what this book is going to be. I love this book. It was in my top 10 favorite books of all time that I posted 6 or 7 months ago, and it is still in my 10 favorite books of all time. That is Deltora Quest 1 by Emily Rada. This is an incredible story that I love. It is the story of these three adventurers, Leif, Barda, and Jasmine. There is a magical belt that has been shattered, and the gems have been scattered across this land of Deltora. And the three adventurers need to go and collect each of these 8 gems in order to restore the belt and restore the magic of the land of Deltora, because there's this evil force that is trying to invade. Problem is that each of these gems is guarded by a ferocious and disturbing beast that they must defeat in order to retrieve each of the gems. And I remember when I was very, very little in elementary school, I won like an award or something for reading. And my teacher asked me, "What is your favorite book of all time?" And I said, Deltora Quest. And now, 20, 25 years later, that is still, it's not my favorite book of all time, but it's definitely up there. This book, my love for this book has never waned. And rereading it, I was hit with so much nostalgia and love for this story. And I've said it before, but my favorite thing about this story is just the mature themes and then the grotesque and disturbing monsters that Emily Rada was able to write into this children's story. There are some truly disturbing things in here when it comes to giant monsters eating people alive, and just the physical descriptions of some of these beasts. And I attribute Deltora Quest a lot to the reason why I'm so into horror and monsters today. I think that comes back to a lot of the creatures that are in this story that have resonated with me throughout all these years. This is the bind up, but if you go and Google each of the original 8 Deltora Quest books, look at the cover art, and you can see some of the monsters that I'm talking about. And some of them are just absolutely horrifying. But besides that, there's still great characters, great plot, great settings in the story. And I recommend Deltora Quest to any adults or kids that are interested in getting into fantasy with a little bit of a scarier element. So that is Deltora Quest, my favorite nostalgia read within the last year. All right, y'all. So that is my ranking of all 12 of my nostalgia picks starting in April 2025 and ending in March 2026. This is a trend that I want to keep going for the foreseeable future. I have a lot of books from my childhood that I still haven't touched in a very long time. And so I plan on continuing the nostalgia pick each month for probably many, many years to come. So I'll keep releasing videos like this and keep talking about my nostalgia picks. These have been some of my favorite books that I've read in the last year. I've had some really good times with a lot of these books. And so I just want to keep revisiting these things from my childhood and keep feeling those sweet senses of nostalgia when I reread something that I absolutely loved from my younger years. So if you've read any of these stories, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you think of them and my ranking. And thank you so much for sticking through this video and for watching. My name is Christian. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. Peace out.